Salvage, a story by user Rantarian. Chapter 21, New Parts. Date point, 2 years, 1 month after Vancouver, aboard the Endless Sequence. The human male had dealt with the Kelsey viciously, and Gersnick had had every expectation that he and Rickelkirk would be dealt with equal viciousness. They had worked, however, in the hope that they were wrong, and that the human male knew something of keeping his promises. Gersnick was surprised then, when after the human female had awoken, the male had actually handed over the datapad containing the details of their cure and allowed them the freedom to use the facilities aboard the Endless Sequence to ensure they were healthy. The human male also showed them to the prisoners. A Gowan male and a Ruahur female who were being kept in a heavy security prison that smelled like a bucket of excrement had just stepped out of a shower. Even then, he did not trust the human male, and he had promised himself that he wouldn't fall for any of the lies the human may tell him, even if he had fulfilled his end of the agreement so far. The human male held such a position of dominance over them, it was difficult to see why he would ever simply release them. Gersnick had at least been relieved to discover that neither he nor Rickelkirk nor the two prisoners had contracted any diseases outside of those provided for on the datapad. A biosample from the human female hadn't returned any unknown samples either, although the human male had not been as cooperative with the request for a blood sample. "I'm not the one who's been infecting everyone," the human male had said when Gersnick had asked for a sample. "And if you've got enough time to look at my blood, shouldn't you be using it to work up a fucking vaccine?" "The vaccines are already being created," Gersnick had told him. It was true, too, but it only required one person to do the work, and in this case it had been Rickelkirk. "Your prisoners will be cured before symptoms begin to manifest." "Good," the human male said, "because I've seen what the infection could do to them, and I wouldn't wish that shit on anybody. That brings me to a good question, though." "A question?" Gersnick asked, and prepared to provide some basic explanation or analogy to explain away whatever the savage might ask. "Are any of the infections airborne?" the human male asked. "Because if they are, I'll need to vent all the fucking air again, and I'd like to avoid that if possible. Jen is already going to be pissed that I've had to blast everywhere she's been with space bleach." Gersnick swallowed hard. He hadn't considered the possibility that any of these horribly dangerous pathogens might be airborne. He had only considered that they might have contracted them through contact with contaminated objects. He couldn't lie about something like this either, not even if it might later thwart the human male. If he did that, and an airborne infection eventually spread from here, all the deaths would be on him. He had investigated the samples enough to understand that if that were to occur, the number of dead would be uncountable. "I will find out for you," he said, "as soon as possible." "Good," the human male replied, seeming to be satisfied. "Once this is fully under control, I'll get you back to your people as soon as possible." "As you say," Gersnick said, still not really believing him. After all, if it were Gersnick who held power over the human, he was certain that he would never simply give that power up, not without being forced to do so. At the human male's departure, he finally sighed with simultaneous relief and worry. Gersnick was not a soldier. He had no hope of rescue if the human male was not good to his word, and he certainly had no reasonable prospects of escape. The Hunter vessels had told him that much, even if he hadn't personally been witness to the crippling of a Dominion cruiser and the destruction of a Kelsey one. There was nothing he could do. Nothing but wait and see. "You're looking better," Adrian said to Jen as she woke up all groggy from drugs. In truth, she looked completely the same as she had before the procedure, which was the intention, of course, but having seen her with her head cut open and brains peeking out, tended to put a different perspective on the matter. "I've got a killer headache," she said, rubbing the side of her head gingerly. "You stayed, though." "I only had to step out for a moment," he told her. "I'm afraid there's going to be some cleaning up to do." She groaned. "What did you do this time? It better not be more buckets of shite. I'll be raging if it's anything like that." "I can definitely promise that there are no buckets of shite," he said, internally cringing at her eventual reaction when she saw the flight deck covered in barbecued-to-death alien Marines. The whole place reeked of burnt flesh, not a particularly pleasant smell, and the internal fluids of the corpses had begun to leak from the husks and stain the deck. It was probably going to be the worst job in history to clean up, and he didn't want to be the only one to suffer through it. "I'll give you a hand, though." She smiled at that, the drugs still partly in effect, and put her hand on his arm. "Ah, you're a sweetie sometimes." He smiled tightly at that. It had been long years since anyone had seen fit to call him anything like sweet, and while it was good to hear it, especially from a pretty girl in a hospital gown, it didn't feel like it fit. Men who were sweet didn't lay waste to enemy soldiers without reservation. They didn't take joy in the death of hundreds, and they didn't break men for revenge. It had been long years since he'd been a man that word could describe. and when Jen did so, it made him feel uncomfortable and undeserving. "Doctor says you'll be out of here in a day or so," he said, turning the conversation back to her. "I know," she said brightly. "I could understand him when he said it. This thing's a clinker. That means great." He grinned at her genuinely this time. "Interestingly, it doesn't seem to translate words like that when you speak the same language. Or maybe it's just your mad slang." Jen pretended to be decently affronted at that. "Excuse me? Says the Australian with the words that don't make any sense at all. Clinker is a perfectly acceptable word when you compare it to the sort of naff stuff that comes out of you." They smiled at each other, and Adrian felt his ears burning. "Well," he said, turning to go, "I'll check in again with you later. I have to keep an eye on the doctors here." She looked disappointed, although she smiled and nodded her understanding. "Of course. Wouldn't pay to let them try to escape. Not before they've got everyone nice and cured, anyway." He turned away from her at that, cursing himself internally for being such a chicken shit. How can a man do the things he'd done and fall apart when confronted by a pretty girl? One thing was certain, though. It was becoming far more difficult to treat Jen as just someone who'd needed saving, or a bother he put up with because she had nowhere else to go. He'd started to actually give a damn about her. Zoddersill Brig. "We're healthy again," Cheer reported to Adrian as he entered the brig. "Can we come out yet?"
"It is uncomfortable in here," Trichlor agreed. "And if we're in here, we can't help with things like a Kelsey cruiser attacking the Zoddersill."
"We did not return so you could stick us in a cage, Adrian," Cheer continued. Adrian sighed in frustration. "You'll get out as soon as I can let you out. The doctors will be going as soon as they're done, so you'll have to sit tight until then." "We have been doing the tight sitting," Cheer replied. "We are tired of it. What is taking so long? And how can you so freely come and go?" "I have Jen keeping an eye on them," Adrian replied. "I gave her a bit of metal pipe to hit them with if they tried anything funny."
"They're aboard the Endless Sequence?"
Trichlor asked.
"What if they engage the FTL and escape?"
"I've made it clear to them that the FTL is booby-trapped," Adrian told her. "I told them what happened to the last Cortai who tried to fucking double-cross me. They didn't seem to be particularly interested in a repeat of that." "You booby-trapped the FTL on the Hunter's ship?" Cheer asked in surprise. It was a simple idea, and would absolutely have resulted in the death of any occupants on a vessel dropping unexpectedly from FTL, along with the destruction of the vessel itself. Very clever. "It was the reactor in that case," Adrian admitted, "but the effect was the same. Beckmer thought he was a lot fucking smarter than he actually was, and his fucking pride almost fucking killed us both. It has made any more FTL travel a long-term project, though."
"That could be a problem," Trichlor said. "That Kelsey cruiser will soon be missed. Others will come looking, and in greater numbers."
Adrian nodded knowingly. "I'd thought of that possibility."
"And?"
Trichlor asked expectantly. "I haven't got any kind of solution," he admitted. "I was hoping you two might be able to give me some ideas." Cheer ran his hands through the thick fur on his neck in frustration. "You? With no ideas? The end of times must be nigh." "No need for that, mate," Adrian said. "I did what I could in a bad situation. We're alive right now, and that means we can plan."
"We have days, Adrian," Trichlor said gently. "Maybe weeks. Maybe."
"She's saying we should leave while we have the chance," Cheer nodded. Cheer added, "We don't have the time to get this old hulk working again, and I doubt you can fight a real army, not with so little time to prepare. Maybe not ever." "I got it working once before," Adrian said. "I can do it again."
"There's no way to get the power to the FTL," Trichlor told him, not for the first time. "Last time you found a workaround, but I can't see you doing that again without tearing open another major section of hull, or replacing all the conduits that were damaged in the existing breach."
"Weeks of work," Cheer said, "even if all of us were working on it." "I know how long it takes," Adrian told them angrily. "I've done it before."
"You can't do it without a wide distribution of those conduits," Trichlor continued. "That's the problem with minor conduits. They aren't meant to channel power back the other way into the big ones." Adrian paused, and Cheer recognized an idea coming upon the human. It always seemed as though a glow light had been lit behind his eyes, and he would break into a grin. Adrian broke into a grin. "You're saying that if I can get power directly to the big conduits, we might be able to get it working?" Trichlor sighed audibly. "Yes, Adrian, but those are all around the main reactor. That's why they are where they are." "So we can replace the reactor?" Adrian asked. "Bypass it. Can we fill the rooms around it with little reactors and plug those fuckers into the big conduits?" Cheer shared a glance with Trichlor.
The idea was possible, but difficult to execute. Those kinds of components aren't normally found outside of an orbital shipyard, Cheers said. But they would have a range of sizes. Everything from troop transports to cruisers to fighters are refitted in such places.
Then we have a plan, Adrian decided. Now tell me where the nearest shipyard is.
2 days later, Gersnik could hardly believe what the human male had told him. Not only were they actually being released, but he was going to release them in a system with an orbital factory. Such places were hives of military industry, and there would be no issue with him or Ruckelkirk finding their way back to their old vessel, or being reassigned to another. I am glad to see that you will honor agreements after all, Gersnik had told the human as they prepared to disembark. Although I admit I am not fond of your intended delivery system.
I'm not going to walk you onto a base and hand you over directly, the human male had said. I'm sure you'll cope with spending a few hours in a hunter pod.
The human female, and Gersnik was beginning to suspect that they weren't actually married at all, had stepped away from her endless cleaning duty to see them off as well. Gersnik did not dislike this one, as she had never showed any willingness to kill him, and had a softer personality in all.
As long as there's really none of my germs in the air, I'll thank you both for your help, doctors.
There's no airborne pathogens, Gersnik replied coldly. He did not appreciate having his competence or intelligence questioned by a savage race. I would never allow such diseases to run freely through our populations.
The Directorate would punish him severely if they were ever affected, the human male said, baring his teeth.
Gersnik was surprised he could accurately judge the probable decision by the Directorate should any Earth pathogens reach a Kortai population. They would not be kind to any doctor who allowed it to happen. You are correct, Gersnik replied. I had no choice in the matter. Your ship is entirely clear of your pathogens.
Well then, the human female said, baring her teeth as well. If I ever need a doctor.
You can find somebody else, Gersnik replied sharply, and the human male barked out his harsh laughter. Shopping trolley. Zoddersill flight deck.
Will they be all right in there?
Jen asked as they stowed the Kortai in the Hunter holding chamber. The chamber hadn't looked very nice, and although Adrian had most recently been using it to store the food he'd obtained on Afrag, it still had an oppressive feeling of what had come before that. She almost wondered whether Adrian couldn't sense it, but she knew enough of his history to know that he wasn't the sort of man to be creeped out by an empty room.
They'll be fine, he said to her, and we don't have any choice. If Cheer and Trix are going to join us on our trip to the orbital factory, we're going to need to keep them safe from any recrimination when they return to their normal lives. That means we don't let the Kortai see them.
So only we play the parts of outlaw pirates? She asked. They're missing out.
Serious business, Jen, he chided her. And as far as they're concerned, we are pirates. We're going to be stealing starship reactors from a space factory. There's no other words for it.
She quickly apologized.
I'm just trying to make the best of this whole thing, she said. I don't know if we'll be coming back from something like this. I might die. You might die. We all might die.
We won't die, he replied quickly. You can't go on thinking you'll die, Jen. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
You can't tell me you've never thought you were going to die, she said. You've been in the Middle East, haven't you? And more recently you fought 2 whole starships?
He cocked his head as though he felt embarrassed.
Well, those starships were run by idiots. I'd never have managed to do what I did if they had even half a brain.
But the Middle East?
She pressed. Maybe pressing too much, but she found she was wanting to know more. That she had to know more about him.
I've seen the news. If you were working over there, you must have been in serious danger all of the time.
It wasn't quite that bad, he said quietly. There were some times, though. I've made my peace a few times. But if I thought it was going to be more dangerous at this factory than it is here, I wouldn't be asking you along.
I'm a Belfast girl, Adrian Saunders, she replied seriously. I've been scared for my life before, and I'm not useless like you seem to think. I have 5 older brothers who taught me to fight. I once punched a girl in the nose, laid her out for 3 full days.
Well, he said with a smile, sorry for underestimating your brawling skills.
Apology accepted, she replied,
suddenly aware at how close he was to her. The proximity was making her whole body tingle with heat, a sensation that was making it difficult to think. This robbery might mean death, she knew. Therefore, she should kiss him, or he should kiss her. Somebody should kiss somebody else. He pulled back after a few moments, so neither happened. All she got was a sense of frustration at the mixed signals. Although she'd normally been spectacularly crap with men, she was forced to wonder if maybe it was just her. Really, she only had experience with Mark from accounts. A relationship that lasted about 3 months before he'd come out as gay. And Jacko, the printer guy. A relationship that had lasted about 5 minutes in a broom cupboard at the office Christmas party. That second one made for some difficult phone calls whenever the office Fuji Xerox broke down.
So you've told me Plan A,
she said, trying to get back to talking about something that didn't send her heart racing.
What about Plan B? I talked to Chair and Trix about your previous Plan Bs, and it seems they're all just you killing everything.
Yeah, well,
Adrian said, clearly discomforted by her plainly critical judgment of his backup plan.
Plan B hasn't really changed.
If it's all right, she said, I do have some ideas for Plan B myself.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one today. We've got more salvage up on the way tomorrow and for the foreseeable future. Since I've already done the intervening bits of the Death Worlders main sequence, it's really just going to be a lot of salvage for a little while. Do expect to see maybe some one-offs here and there. I did do a live stream the other day that contained some one-offs and some single-shot stories, so that one was really good. If you guys want to go ahead and check that one out. I will put that link in the description. I'm trying to figure out end cards right now so that, like, at the end of the videos, you guys get, like, 10, 20 seconds of just, like, you can click this if you want to read more, or click this, if, you know, that kind of crap. I don't know how to set any of that up. I do want to say thank you so much to my patrons. I've reached $20, another $80, and we're at my $100 goal. You know, that's my first goal, and we're already, a fifth of the way there, and it hasn't even really been a month yet, guys. So I'd really like to thank, Artur, Misleading Guide, and Russ of the North. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. Thanks again, guys, for being here with me. Thanks for spending the time out of your busy days. I will see you all in the next one, and I appreciate you guys.